Good afternoon to you, Ray. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. I have with me today Dr. Ray Carter. My name's Geoff Kontzle, and we're going to be talking about practical contract management. So, Ray is a best practiced writer, author on this topic, and does a significant amount of work on the subject. So it's great to have you with us here today, Ray, and hopefully we can have a good, detailed conversation on the topic.
Okay, thank you for that, Jeff. It's a pleasure to talk to you this afternoon about contract management, one of my favourite topics. Funny enough.
Yeah.
Uh, okay, yeah, let's do it. Let's go.
Okay, fantastic. Well, I think we might as well start at the very beginning, by trying to define what contract management is. Um, how would you describe contract management? How would you define it?
Well, I think contract management is a big subject. We have courses that last for 5 days to cover contract management. And we can look at it from defining our needs through to contract closeout. As an overall definition, we always like to start with the idea that contract management is the management of fair and equitable agreements by knowledge and competent people for the benefit of both organizations and the wider community. That's kind of a big overarching definition of contract management. But I think basically it ticks most of the boxes. And we want contracts that are fair and reasonable, because if they're not fair and reasonable, they're not sustainable. We need people who know what they're doing, people who are competent, qualified, certified, experienced, and it needs to be for focusing on a win-win outcome. It needs to focus on the benefit of both parties, but also nowadays, with climate change and with the impact of contracts on resources, there's also the impact on the wider community. So I'm using a really big, overarching definition.
Yeah.
But in the book, as you know, we do a number of different definitions, but they all come down to much the same thing, which is the right supplier, right scope of work, right contract tends to reduce the probability of problems and pitfalls.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting, and of course, it is such a wide topic and a wide subject. Um, you know, Quite often, you hear, people spending an awful lot of time in the sort of pre-contract award stage, doing quite a bit of work there. But when it comes to the contract running and the contract management element of the contract, um, this is where there seems to be some challenges and some pitfalls along the way.
Yeah,
Are
absolutely.
there any, experiences or any areas that you think are stronger than others in this area that cause these pitfalls and challenges?
Well, I think it's pretty weak actually. I think you're absolutely right. There's lots of resources and time gone into the procurement sort of pre-award phase.
Mm, mm,
But often in our experience when we're working in companies, the contract itself is sort of passed over to a technical person to manage. So they're not really contract managers; they are managers of contracts,
mm.
and it's not their core discipline. There might be technical people like doctors, nurses, engineers, scientists, all these sorts of people we come across all have contracts to manage, and they're not. It's not their core competence,
Yeah.
and that leads to issues, that leads to problems, uh, which can include disagreements with suppliers over what is in scope and what is out of scope, poor relationships, lack of flexibility, contractors who don't deliver their contractual obligations, a whole list of things that
Yeah.
can go wrong when the contract is actually awarded, and then we're into sort of service delivery phase of the
Mm.
contract.
Yeah, because it's often said that these these challenges and these pitfalls, they do lead to an erosion of value out of the contracts. Is there any argument in that? Is to
Oh,
say, well,
yeah,
what sort of
absolutely.
value is that?
Yeah. Well, World CC, who do a lot of research in this area, they've come up with a figure, which they say is evidence-based, of 9.2% of the average contractor's lost value is lost because of poor contract management. Now, that's not only post-award, that also means getting the scope wrong or selecting the wrong supplier. But collectively, cumulatively, it's around about 9.2 or call it 10% wastage, loss of value. And on big projects, like HS2 and all these other big projects that are around, well, not around, but were around, and are going to be
Yeah,
even more. Now we've got all the houses to build, and now we've got defence contracts because of the latest increasing spending. That's
mhm,
more like to be 15 to 20%
yeah,
of contract loss by cost overruns, quality issues, delays, all that list that you often hear when reports are written about these big contracts, and because these are big public sector contracts,
yeah,
where these things are put before the Public Accounts Committee. And I can tell you, as a person who deals with the private sector, they're just as big for them, but they're able to keep it a lot more uh, confidential. So I'm not allowed
yeah,
on this program to talk about what certain companies get up to because I've signed confidentiality agreements.
yeah.
But as I said, what goes on in the private sector is not that different to what goes on in the public sector in these large, complex contracts.
Yeah, and it is pretty worrying when you see the scale of the you know the values being lost on these contracts. Is there any sort of continuing theme around that? Any areas specifically where you think that perhaps the focus is being lost or
Well,
the
yeah,
attention is
yeah.
not being given?
I can tell exactly. 80% of the time when we do investigations or we do reports, it normally comes down to what we call the three S's, which is a poor scope of work. So from the very beginning, there's confusion over what the contractor has to do, what the client wants, what sort of budget we're talking about, and that leads to often selecting the wrong supplier who
Yeah,
really doesn't have the competence or resources to do the work. And the third S, of course, is that tends to create a very difficult and uh, contractual type relationship, lots of conflict, lots of disputes, lots of variations because of those first two S's. And so in my experience, if you get the scope right and you select the right supplier, you are three-quarters of the way to a reasonable outcome. But that's what normally happens. It's normally confusion.
yeah,
And I'm really concerned about at the moment. I mean, we're talking about spending a lot of extra money on defence, and I can foresee, contracts being awarded very quickly without due diligence, saying for good reason, but saying to suppliers, right, build this, but supply that. There's a risk there that we could have some very suboptimal outcomes if we
yeah.
rush into these large, complex defence projects without all the steps and the due diligence. It could lead to some issues.
Yeah, so if we were to think, therefore, about contract management as being a really beneficial thing for people to invest their time into, I guess it's about sort of saying, well, we want to have an effective contract management ending to this activity. And I know fairly recently there's been a lot of work going into government departments to enhance skill levels and things of that nature. Is there anything that you feel that could be done to really impress the people to really want to see the upside of
Yeah,
their
yeah, yeah.
focus on
Okay, well,
contract
that's a
management?
good question. I mean, what separates the good practice from the poor practice is a number of elements. First of all, companies that invest money in contract management are normally able to be more agile and more responsive
Mm.
because they have people who know how to manage the contract and get the best value from the supplier. They also tend to be companies that have invested time and effort and money into developing the team so they are competent and knowledgeable, as per my definition earlier on. They're also very good at communicating to other stakeholders the value of good contract management, so people buy into it. And also, they're very good at using AI to do a lot of the routine work and leave time for the more relationship activities, where dealing with the people and let the numbers be dealt with by AI. But let's keep hold of the people side of the process, motivation. Um, for example, in a really well managed contract, in our experience, the contractor will be innovative, they'll be flexible, they'll be responsive,
Yeah.
which can be extremely valuable particularly in a large, complex contract where things can go wrong, you don't want a contractor who feels that they've been, it's a win-lose situation for them. This is the opportunity to make a killing because we pushed them down to the wire on rates. So I think win-win outcomes will give a win-win approach to managing contracts will give you those sorts of benefits. As I say, innovation. The supply comes up with a good idea, they'll come to you with it. They won't come to you if you're a win-lose relationship.
Mm. Yeah.
They obviously won't do that. They won't be flexible and they won't be responsive
Mm.
if they're
And
not properly managed.
no, and I think this is these are important statements that you're making there because very much the where the contracts have evolved and have gone wrong, if you like, in the way they've been managed has largely been down to the, as you say, selecting the wrong supplier in particular. And then of course, by taking perhaps the cheapest price in town and just focusing on price, we end up with unsustainable contracts, and then you end up with suppliers sort of cutting corners
Yeah.
and if you like, only doing things for themselves rather than for the supplier,
I mean, the irony of this, of
rather
course,
than the
from cost,
customer at the end of the day.
oh,
Yeah.
the irony from this, of course, is that when you look at when you do a price analysis, contractors are slightly more expensive, but are flexible, responsive, and innovative are more valuable because if you go down the lowest price route, you're going to have variations, you're going to have claims, you're going to have disputes.
Yeah.
And when you add up all the variations and claims and disputes and all the time it took to reconcile them, it's cost you more in total cost terms than if you'd gone for the slightly more expensive contractor, is well resourced, knows what they're doing, and will do a good job. It's ironically it costs you more to go down the cheap route than it does to go down the more expensive route.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
know it's counterintuitive, but that's what happens.
But that's what happens in practice.
Yeah.
And so obviously you've raised here some very, very interesting points and some very interesting elements of discussion about the whole topic. So we were talking there about effective contract management and how people within their businesses can take advantage of better insight. Now, I know that you provide a wide range of courses to help businesses achieve better insight into contract management. Are you able to describe some of those courses for us?
Three tiers basically. We have one day introduction type courses, 2 day courses which are intermediate level where they go into more detail, and then we have 5 day courses which are certified, often are certified either by World CC or they are mini MBAs. So it's really 1 day introduction, 2 day intermediate, and then 5 day advanced in a very arbitrary sort of way.
Yeah.
And they're available either open enrollment, where people come and we have these courses running all the time and people sign up to them. And also we do in-house versions where we go to the company and make it a bespoke program. And they can either be face-to-face, physically going there. I mean, you recently went to Gabon to
Yeah. Yeah.
deliver
Yeah.
courses.
Yeah.
Whereas on other occasions it's virtual.
Yeah.
It's an event like this. We set up a Zoom link and we go through the course 1, 2, or 5 days.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, so if I was to think about enrolling on the course, how would I go about doing that?
Well, yeah, I think the best thing is to go to the DPSS website and they're all all the courses are listed up there, and
Yeah.
you click on the link and you send an email to the
Yeah.
administration. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
the admissions team. I'll
Yeah.
get it right in a minute. The
Yeah.
admissions team, and they'll respond back.
Fantastic. Okay, well, Ray, I think it's been great having this conversation. It's certainly enlightened I hope the audience there around contract management and all the issues and the challenges that can come from managing contracts. But it's good to know that the benefits of this best practice can be discussed, achieved, and run through courses. So, just like to thank you for your time and once again, thanks, Ray.